Streaming live, this is Tracking the Tropics.
It doesn't have a name just yet, but all eyes are on Tropical Invest 95L with an eerily similar forecast track to Hurricane Dorian. The Track of the Tropics team live to talk about the intensification of this system in the days ahead, with the Bahamas already being hit and Florida in its sights. Hey there, everybody. WFLA digital anchor JB Buno here with you on another edition of Tracking the Tropics. Behind me, we have some folks, including Serafina Brooks, Daisy Ruth, and Sebastian joining us here on the stream. They're kind of shadowing what we're doing here today behind the scenes. Joining us from WRIC in Richmond, Virginia. Welcome back to the program to Chief Meteorologist John Bernier. But as always, we want to start things off with meteorologist Amanda Holly standing by with the very latest on Tropical Invest 95L. Dare I say that this is sort of a very, very mini Dorian at this point in the forecast track, Amanda?
It's potentially, but right now at this point in its lifespan, it is not a tropical system just yet. It doesn't have that closed area of circulation. We just got the 2 p.m. advisory in, actually, and they haven't upgraded anything. We're still looking at an area of investigation, just a bunch of showers and thunderstorms, really, that are disorganized that have a potential to organize. So when we were talking about Dorian, of course, as it was approaching the Bahamas, we were talking about a well-formed system. So, we're going to see what this one does. We do have an update here for you, though. Of course, all eyes on this area because we are on the heels of Dorian, right? It is already impacting the Bahamas, like JB said, and it is going to continue to impact the Bahamas, especially the areas that were impacted by Dorian. So we're going to have to watch this closely here. But right now, it is just an area of low pressure, but not an organized area of low pressure. That's why it's just Invest 95L. That's why we give it that title. It does have a high chance of developing. The National Hurricane Center still giving it a likely chance of developing at least into a tropical depression, potentially into a named storm over the next 2 or 5 days. You can see the 2-day development here, 70% chance, 5-day development, 80% chance. So again, a good chance that this will likely become at least a depression, if not a named storm. But the direction that this thing goes is still in question, especially with the latest model runs that came in today. Earlier, yesterday, 24 hours ago, we were thinking this wave was going to travel over the peninsula of Florida, bring us some showers and thunderstorms for this weekend, travel into the Gulf of Mexico, and potentially impact the Gulf Coast. Now we're talking about the potential for it to have a similar path to what Dorian did and kind of move along the east coast of Florida and up the southeast coast of the United States. But both models that we talk about, the GFS and the European, the American and the European model, they are actually kind of split. So these are the spaghetti plots that we're looking at this point. And you can see here, I do want to note that the starting point of a lot of these models, they don't have the same starting point. And that's a big deal because we don't have an organized system yet. And when we don't have an organized system, models do really bad with them. So, that's something to just take with a grain of salt here. If the center of the storm develops a little farther to the north, we could be talking about a storm that stays farther offshore. If the center of the storm develops a little farther to the south, we could be talking about more impacts to Florida. But right now, there are a lot of question marks, especially again with these latest model runs, and everyone wants to see them. So here they are, the American model and the European model. The American model keeps this system very weak as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico, doesn't maybe even develop it in some runs. The European, there's been one run of this, and it now takes it up the east coast and develops it into a little bit stronger of a storm. And I think this scenario would be if the storm takes a faster development track, it would be a little stronger and stay off the east coast there. If it takes a slower development track, then we're talking maybe a little bit more of an American model scenario here where it moves into the Gulf of Mexico and is not quite as strong. So a lot of question marks here. Regardless, the Bahamas, they are seeing the rain already. They're seeing the gusty winds, just not under an organized system at this point. Floridians, for the weekend, this is something you're going to have to keep an eye on over the next 24 hours. We are going to be talking about the potential for a wet weekend or a dry weekend. Last weekend, very similar scenario. If this system stays offshore, we could be on the dry side of the storm. If the weaker system, the wave of tropical moisture moves over the state, we could be talking about a wet weekend here. So something to keep an eye on over the next 24 hours. That's when we'll do the comparison of the models, right? The trends, see where the trends go. If the European was an outlier, then maybe we'll throw that run out, but we'll have to just wait and see at this point. The other tropical wave that we talked about yesterday, I'll briefly mention this, not organized just yet, still sitting off the coast of Africa here, still has a 0% chance of developing over the next 2 days, and then thereafter it will move into a more favorable environment as it travels towards the Lesser Antilles, towards the Caribbean, and then we'll give it a 40% chance of developing into a tropical depression, maybe a tropical storm there. But obviously a long way off with that one. We are going to continue to watch 95L though. If it develops into a tropical storm, again, if it organizes that center of circulation and if it has those wind speeds at least 40 miles per hour, that's what we're going to see when it gets named. It will be named Umberto. That is our next named storm. And if this gets organized, that's what we'll call it. For now, it is still Invest 95L. JB?
Thank you, Amanda. Joining us again from WRIC in Richmond, Virginia. It's Chief Meteorologist John Bernier. So, John, I think I'm going to answer my rhetorical question for our viewers. It wasn't posed in any form of seriousness. This is not going to be a mini Dorian. We are not talking about a storm that is that strong at this stage in its progressions. But as far as the forecast track, it's pretty similar here. We're not dealing with another Category 5 monster as far as the storm goes. But as far as the path that takes it across the Bahamas and then potentially up the coast of Florida here, we're talking about some similar characteristics.
Very much so, although it's kind of the opposite of the Star Trek movies, where the odd-numbered ones are the nasty ones and the even-numbered ones were the good movies. One of the things with this, if it takes the same track, is remember, Dorian caused a lot of upwelling, so that's water being pulled up from deeper levels of the Atlantic Ocean. So sea surface temperatures right now off the east coast of Florida, they're between about 81 and 84 degrees instead of what they were just about 2 weeks ago, checking in the middle 80s, even the upper 80s in a few spots. So that's going to limit some of the energy that is available for this storm to develop. Now, again, if we show what that track that Amanda had showing, the storm going off into the Gulf of Mexico, which is the GFS model, the American model, taking it away, which really would just bring rain into the southern portions of Florida and just kind of glance us along the west coast. The east coast would be the area where with this storm went through and took essentially going up the eastern seaboard, a track more like the European model that Amanda and I were talking about, which you're seeing right now. That storm kind of comes up, parallels the coastline. That's going to be a thing where we will have some winds along the coast. This could reach hurricane strength. I've seen pressures, especially once it gets up to around Charleston, South Carolina, dropping down far enough to where it could become even a Category 2 storm if the models hold true. And then the story would be a lot of rainfall on top of areas that just have come out of an excessive rainfall event. So that would be, I think, the bigger problem that we would be looking at as we head, if the storm comes up along the east coast of Florida, would be a potential for a heavy rainfall event. Maybe not necessarily Dorian, but, and Amanda can chime in on this, maybe more of a possibility of something that's kind of akin to what Matthew did a couple of years ago, which could be big problems up into the Carolinas. Oh, and by the way, if you were to take that European model out, I'll tell you a little dirty secret. Which Amanda may not have told you, it shows another system coming literally right behind this one. It was from that area out in the middle of the Atlantic, that really where you weren't kind of, showing any development in it, but it actually hints at another system following right on the heels of this one, which would be, if this one becomes the H storm, it would be the I storm. As we always say along the mid-Atlantic coastline, be aware of the I storm to see what that possibly does. So that's going to be an interesting situation. Amanda just plotted up the tropical weather outlook. Usually it's what comes out at 2 o'clock. It's already been updated. And essentially what it's saying right now is that the data we're seeing from the satellite, and we can derive winds from the satellites. That's how we look at a lot of these storms on the way out in the tropical Atlantic, places that the hurricane hunters do not go to. They indicate that we really don't have a close circulation with this system yet, so it can't be called a tropical depression. Winds aren't all that strong right now, but the pressures are favorable for development. Everything's favorable for a tropical depression or tropical storm to form in the next couple of days. Still plans for the hurricane hunters to go out there and kind of, circle inside the storm, drop the little instrument packets, the drop sons in there, And we either tonight, I think 5 o'clock, 11 o'clock, or tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. Do not be surprised if you see them put out what they call a potential tropical cyclone advisory. And JB, let's briefly explain what that is. We call it a PTC.
Sure.
That's simply, it's simply kind of a what we call an oh crap advisory, for the simple reason that this storm would be forming so close to land masses that they could be affected within the next 48 hours. So ideally, we just don't want all of a sudden come out and say, well, we've got this storm that's just formed, and now there's a hurricane watch in effect for you. So this is kind of try and give you a little bit of lead time on it that, hey, there may be something developing here. We may have to issue watches and warnings on it very soon.
We have a lot of commenters joining us here on our Facebook pages. We're streaming to apps, websites, and social media platforms across the southeastern United States and even beyond. We've had viewers joining us from really around the globe here on Tracking the Tropics. Again, Chief Meteorologist John Bernier joining us from WRIC in Richmond, Virginia. I want to bring in also Amanda Holly, who is joining us now after her brief stint over there at the weather wall to explain exactly what was going on. I want to just point out, because John was mentioning a little bit about the advisory, we could see this 2 o'clock advisory come down really in the next few minutes, guys, right?
It did come down.
Oh, it did come down.
It actually came down right as we were starting, and I had a quick chance to look at it before. And again, no changes there. Still 70% chance of developing in the next 2 days, 80% chance of developing in the next 5 days. And John was actually explaining some of the things they talked about in their little mini discussion. Favorable conditions, we could be talking about something forming tonight or early tomorrow.
Wow, so that advisory that does come down, it's supposed to come down at 2 o'clock Eastern. It dropped to what, maybe 20 minutes early. But so the big headline on that advisory, John, it sounds like not much change, and now we're looking to the 5 o'clock and the 8 o'clock advisories for future development.
And while we call it advisory, let's actually, the correct name for it, it's an outlook. Okay, so we issue advisories on storms. We issue an outlook for what we're seeing going on in the Atlantic. So it's a slightly different product. It comes out 4 times a day.
Interesting. Okay, everybody. So again, we are monitoring 95L here with meteorologist Amanda Holly here at Storm Team 8 at WFLA and WRIC Chief Meteorologist John Bernier. Guys, I think that there is a heightened sense of awareness right now as far as hurricanes go, as far as the tropics go. Amanda, maybe you can hop in here because the forecast track, the way things are looking as we see these spaghetti plots, it just looks so similar to Dorian, not even just for what Florida's East Coast could expect as far as the storm goes, but the Bahamas too. I mean, they're already getting rain, and they could be getting a lot more rain really in the days to come.
Yeah, regardless of this area of moisture, right? The showers and thunderstorms, the disorganized area of showers and thunderstorms, it's already impacting the southeastern Bahamas. But we're talking about this storm slowly moving northwest at about 5 to 10 miles per hour. Again, just this general area of showers and thunderstorms moving in the northwest direction at about 5 to 10 miles per hour. That means the areas that were impacted by Dorian, we're talking Grand Bahama, we're talking Abaco, both of those islands will be experiencing showers and thunderstorms whether this thing develops or not. They don't need any rain, they don't need any sort of wind, they need all the sunshine that they can get to continue recover. But regardless, development or not, they're going to see these showers and thunderstorms moving in the next 24 hours.
And that's probably the same thing we have to say for especially the eastern half of Florida is that no matter how this thing plays out, if it slides up the East Coast, there are going to be more areas that are going to have significant rainfall as we go from the coastline going inland. Let's say, just draw a line right down the middle of the state, from, Tallahassee all the way down to the Keys. And on the east side of that, it's going to be some pretty good rainfall. That's still going to be an issue we're going to have to deal with because the ground is still saturated in many spots as a result of Dorian's rainfall.
And if it stays on the weaker side, John, it's going to stay a little more spread out, not quite as organized there. And showers and thunderstorms are going to be spread out even more so across the peninsula of Florida. Whereas, here along the West Coast, when Dorian slid by, we didn't see anything. I mean, maybe a rain band or two, a very outer rain band. But if this one stays on the weaker side, we are going to see those showers and thunderstorms moving in our general direction over the weekend. So again, we're talking about, go ahead.
And the other thing I was going to say is if it doesn't develop very well, it is going to be a rather slow-moving system. So you may not have the intensity of the rainfall, but you will have the duration of it that will allow for it to also accumulate over there. But again, you are correct. A weaker storm will spread the rain shield out, just like as when Dorian came up the coastline. the storm essentially, the core of strong winds began to weaken, so they began to spread out, kind of like crushing a mushroom down, or crushing a box down, if you want to look at it that way, which is what caused problems when you got up into the eastern Carolinas and all the issues up in the Outer Banks.
That's exactly right. That was a great analogy. I really like that. So you can see on satellite right now, everything's still very spread apart. And if the storm stays weaker, if it doesn't develop, we're going to still see that those showers and thunderstorms.
We have a lot of commenters joining us. I want to give a shout out to Michael Johnson, Margaret Roy, Cliff McAfee Jr., Jen Ball, Leon Hooten, Sinson Wilkes, Joe Danilla, Haley Love, Ashley Munoz, and many others who are joining us on Facebook Live, commenting along, keeping the conversation going here. We really appreciate all of our commenters on WFLA's Facebook page, as well as other Facebook pages that we are streaming to live here on Tracking the Tropics. One of the questions that we're being asked a lot here in the comment section, obviously, with Dorian just really departing us not even really a week ago as far as the continental U.S., the potential for this storm to accelerate to major category status, like a Cat 3, a Cat 4, or Cat 5, I mean, the chances of that happening really are slim to none, right, guys, for people asking in the comment section?
Go ahead, Amanda.
I was just going to say we're kind of dealing with some different factors at play. We've got an upper level low over the Gulf of Mexico. It's not quite the same atmospheric setup that Dorian had. So we're also talking about some cooler waters that are over the Bahamas because of Dorian, because Dorian sat there for a long time.
John?
Yeah, you essentially, Amanda just said what I was going to say. You never say never about it happening, but the conditions are not as supportive. The fuel that is there in the ocean is not as supportive, and it's also closer to land. So even though it's still over the ocean, there are going to be some land interactions that are going to affect us. In fact, one thing you could see with this, especially if it's a slower moving system, we might see an increased risk of tornadoes out of this, especially because basically the frictional effects of the land masses. So that might be weaker storm, maybe more tornadoes over the area. But again, we know the big damaging factor, it's water, 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 and water. We can do pretty well with the winds. It was terrible in the Bahamas, but especially Florida, as you go up through the southeast, it's water that's the big risk, and the flooding risk that we have to be concerned with.
So not as big of a worry right now as far as things go concerning, in relation to a couple of weeks ago with Dorian, but again, still a slow-moving storm that we're keeping our eye on here on Tracking the Tropics. This graphic right here, you guys, I just want to ask about it really quickly because Teresa Graham in the comment section is asking about the discrepancy between the GFS and the Euro models that we have here. Maybe one or maybe both of you could kind of explain as to why we're dealing with such right here, as we see this animate on our screen, why these models look so different. Amanda?
I'll start. We were just talking about one run of the European. They each take into account a couple different factors. And we have to remember right now, the models are basically guessing at this point because we haven't had those hurricane hunters move into this area. They haven't sampled the atmosphere around it. So they're doing their best at sampling what we're starting with and then taking it from there. The GFS is sampling maybe a little bit weaker of a system, guessing at a little bit weaker of a system, and maybe a system forming a little farther to the south. The European, their latest run kind of did the opposite, sampled maybe a center starting to form a little farther to the north, where conditions are maybe slightly more favorable for development.
And one of the things is even in the various model runs, we're seeing shifts back and forth. I always like to use the analogy, I use this with winter storms. Essentially right now, we are in the grocery store and we're in the bakery aisle and we've got all the mixes, all the muffin mixes right there in front of us. They all look real good, real good on the boxes, but we haven't even started mixing this up and baking yet. We don't know if they're going to come out burnt. Okay, that's so we've just gotten the box of baking mixes where we're at right now, and we're just starting to put this into the oven to start cooking it to see what's going to come out. And sometimes the brownies turn out well, and sometimes they're like a little piece of slate that you can bang. So that's the one thing you have to watch for.
I anoint him chief meteorologist of great weather analogies.
I agree.
think that John Bernier, of course, always Great to have your expertise here on the program, John, and we look forward to having you back here for other episodes of Tracking the Tropics. Everybody, again, to kind of keep you in the loop as to what we do here, we bring on some of the finest meteorologists from across the United States here. We are here at WFLA in Tampa. That's kind of where our HQ is as far as Tracking the Tropics, to provide you with regular, up-to-date coverage as to what is going on out there in the Atlantic, what's going on with various various systems that we're tracking here throughout the day, pretty much every hour of every day here at Storm Team 8. So people are asking, in relation to our Dorian coverage, we did this a lot for Hurricane Dorian. We're going to be keeping an eye on Invest 95L in the hours and days ahead here to make sure that you are aware and safe. As we saw with Dorian, a system can go from unorganized to organized and go from, invest or depression status to category 1 or 2 or 3 or beyond status very quickly. So the whole idea of our program here is to make sure that we bring on some of the most knowledgeable meteorologists in the country so that you are in the know as to what is going on with these models, because the models might not look consistent very much right now, but they will be starting to agree more and more in the days to come as this system really takes shape. So meteorologists like John Bernier joining us from Richmond, Virginia, and of course Amanda Holly right here with us at WFLA, and others, our entire Tracking the Tropics team will be keeping you posted right here on this app, this website, or this social media platform. So we will be back with future streams. We'll be back tomorrow with our 1:30 Eastern, 12:30 Central stream, unless something happens significantly in the hours ahead. But of course, we're working around the clock to make sure that you know what we know. Everybody, for WRIC Chief Meteorologist John Bernier in the bottom left-hand portion of your screen. Thanks so much for joining us, John. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And Storm Team 8 meteorologist Amanda Holly. I'm WFLA's JB Buno. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you tomorrow or sooner right here on Tracking the Tropics. Take care, everyone.
Thank you for watching Tracking the Tropics.